I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next special Board of Education meeting is on Wednesday, April 10th at 7:30 in the board meeting room. I'm going to start my chair remarks by recognizing a former member of the Board of Education who died earlier this month. Susie Perdicone was elected to the Board of Education in November 2006. She served 3 terms and was well admired by her fellow board members as a dedicated, well-prepared, thoughtful, intelligent, collaborative, accountable, and passionate individual. Susie was an outstanding advocate for education for all students of the Darien Public Schools. She was a varsity athlete at Boston College and understood the sacrifices to be an outstanding athlete. She was a huge supporter of the athletic campus we now have at Darien High School, including the lighted fields and artificial turfs. She also worked on Wall Street and brought financial acumen to her board role. She pushed the district and administration to broaden opportunities and achievements of all students. She was fair-minded but clear in her priorities. Susie could be counted on to bring common sense and a cool head to a spirited discussion and was very persuasive in her debates. In short, she was an excellent board member. I'd like to first thank Dennis, who reached out to a lot of former board members to help put together these remarks. But in particular, I want to thank the former Board of Ed members who shared their thoughts with the sitting board and acknowledge them. George Riley, Katie Stein, Clara Sartori, John Bolton, Amy Bell, Kim Westcott, Heather Shea, Michael Harmon, Jim Pluty, and Morgan Whittier. Susie's wondering if she made a difference. She certainly did. Thank you for that list of names. Many of you all have, and Betsy Haggerty Ross, thank you, Dennis. Many have joined the meeting tonight in honor of Susie and her life. Susie took her responsibility for 4,900 students seriously, but there were 4 students that were her priority. Her 4 daughters, Lacey, Lexi, Hollis, and Isabel. Our thanks to them for sharing their mom with Darien, and our deepest condolences to them and the extended family. She left this life way too soon and will be sorely missed in this world by all who knew her. We hope that these memories can help bring comfort to her family. Thank you for those words, Dennis. Okay. We have a moment of silence, please, to honor Susie. Okay. Thank you all. With that, we'll move to public comment.
If anybody in person would like to participate in public comment, please come to the podium. If anybody online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay. No one in person? All right. With that, we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. I think we're on. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd just like to point out that we have 7 high school students who were part of the programming club on Saturday. They made up 2 teams that competed at the Lockheed Martin's CyberQuest, an annual cybersecurity competition. And that's at Sarcorsi up in Stratford. The Blue Wave team came in first place. And the Blue Wave team is Pasquale Hoffman, Reagan Little, Oscus, Michelle, and Nathan Coropella. We also had a team competing for the first time. That's the Blue Dot Wave team. They had a successful day. Aiden Unesian, Michael Liu, and Brady Elridge. Congratulations to them, and we thank the staff members for the support of this particular activity and for supervising during the weekend. If I may just recognize Chief Anderson real quickly. I had an opportunity to say goodbye to him today. Bless you. He will be leaving just before the end of the week here. So for over 40 years, he's served Darien, the town of Darien, and we thank him for that. And most importantly, I certainly thank him for his professional and personal friendship along the way, but I also especially thank him for keeping our youngest children and our students safe. So thank you, and we wish him well in his retirement. The interview process for Ox Ridge and Henley process, there's interviews that will be taking place all day Thursday. We have parents and administration and staff signed up for that. I want to thank the Blue Wave staff basketball team. Our team competed against the Harlem Wizards on Sunday. It was a fun-filled event. The superintendent cannot play basketball. I will say, though, like our parents and our kids can sing and dance very well. It just was a huge fun activity, a good community event. So thank you for everyone who participated in that. The P&Z meetings will be on April 23rd, so that coincides you'll hear a little bit about that this evening. That coincides with the board meeting. We're going to have to split up somehow. And I think we know how we can do that. So they will accommodate us for the first part of the meeting at 7 o'clock. I want to recognize Holly Clark, who was here. I want to thank the members of the DAEG for bringing Holly, who spoke to our parents and our staff about AI, which is an important topic. And we're trying to respond to AI deliberately, thoughtfully, contemplatively, and also safely. You may notice that the Wave Strong Way signs are installed at the high school. Those were approved by the board last year. So as you enter the high school, you can see the signs around the loop. Anonymous alerts launched yesterday. We had some reports essentially from the middle school. Over the past few weeks, the Literacy Committee core team has been reviewing the K through 3 literacy compendium of resources. We'll continue that work, and we're dealing with that thoughtfully and deliberately and keeping a very open mind. The ELP, the articulation process for ELP students with IEP service and 504 accommodations will be held virtually on Wednesday, April 3. So that's next week, next Wednesday, April 3, for the articulation process. We have a choral festival, I think it's tomorrow. I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder. I don't think so, but okay, thank you. You get a wee chance to go to the Darien High School. That's an elementary performance, and the secondary performance follows immediately thereafter. So 6:30 for elementary and 8 o'clock for the secondary. And then we have, just looking ahead a little bit, April 3rd, the district-wide Young Composers and Songwriters. The talent in the district is unbelievable, from like the homes, even the talent competition to these or other formal. It gives our students an opportunity to sort of step up and live out their passion a little bit and show what they can do. So thank you to them. Tomorrow we have the Board of Education Communication meeting is on. I will say that Annika Mengel, who's a senior, the first part of that meeting, I'm proud that she's coming forward with her rendition, and she's worked with the staff around the district logo. That's part of the strategic plan. And it's just, if you can't be at the meeting, maybe preview it at another time. I think you'll be very impressed with her presentation. Excuse me. Board of Finance meeting is April 2nd, and policy meeting April 5th. We are closed on Good Friday in observance of the holiday. So we're reading a few other dates out for the RTM. F&B is April 1st. April 8th. Oh, both April 1st and April 8th. Education is on April 8th. And the Board of Finance is on April 2nd. And that concludes my announcements.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Student representative reports.
Good evening. So we had our DHS Student Government Plan bonfire last Friday, and it was successful. A lot of students showed up. We had free pizza, and the Darien High School PA provided us with free dessert as well. And the courtyard grass is still scorched, but it was worth it. And this week is also Spirit Week. So the student government started it off with an egg hunt where we hid about a couple thousand eggs around Darien High School, and the 4 grades are competing to see which grade can find the most of them. And also the last of college decisions are coming out this week and next week. So if you see any seniors on edge, that would explain it.
Thank you.
Might I humbly add the junior class is currently winning the school-wide egg hunt. And the junior classes also finished taking their SATs. Students who were attending the recent band trip to Nashville will be taking it on April 5th. It was a great trip. We had some great performances and more importantly, some great experiences. And Hello Dolly finished a successful run to great crowds, great turnout. And we were so delighted to see what everyone was able to come together and perform. And our spring athletic season is officially off and running, especially with our coveted lacrosse. And we wish our girls team the best of luck as they play tonight. And thank you so much.
Thank you all. Okay, approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the regular meeting held on March 13th, 2024? That is Julie, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? That opposed? Abstaining. Sini will abstain. Okay. Board committee reports. John?
Last Thursday, we had a finance committee meeting, and we discussed the transfers and as a committee recommend that the board approve the transfers later this evening when Rich addresses them.
Anyone else? Sarah?
I'll just report out as went to a Thriving Youth Task Force meeting last Thursday as the board's representative. And as we wind up, Dr. Dad will show us a little bit more later, but I think some stats really stuck out to me, and I want to just share them just so we have them in the back of our mind. These are for 11th and 12th graders. This is from the Thriving Youth survey that they submitted, which it's been out, but these just really stuck out. So 24% of our 11th and 12th graders had ridden with a driver under the influence. 33% of them reported a parent had given them alcohol. 17% reported that there were no clear rules discouraging drinking in their household. And 12%, this is one that really stuck out to me, 12% had been drunk at school. And that really, I was like, oh my gosh, they're drunk during the day, but it was games and prom counted as that. So that was very alarming to me. So I just, as we're listening to Dr. Dad, I think that it's important to have in the back of our minds.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other board committee reports? HHR continues. I think the report is the same as last time. We did just have a meeting. Our thanks to Representative Mara for helping to get all our stuff filed with the state. But otherwise, we are continuing with phasing meetings and planning parent meetings, and we'll have people on site in April to continue to do some exploratory work, and trailers arrive in May. We're thrilled. Anything else, Ellen?
No, that's good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Presentations and discussions. We'll start with the update on mental health and wellness. Alicia is joining us. We're going to keep questions on this one pretty high level. And if there's anything that needs a particular amount of feedback, or follow up, we can use email to follow up.
So she's doing the presentation on wellness, and I can tell you she has not too well at the minute. She has gone downhill. She did not want to miss this opportunity to present, but she's feeling well under the weather right now. So I thank you for being here, and we'll get you out of here probably as quickly as we can.
I appreciate that. And I apologize if you need me to repeat anything, just let me know. I will do my best. And thank you for having me join such an important topic. Every time I'm here, I appreciate the questions and the feedback. So I just wanted to start with a couple photos of our wellness center. Our wellness center, we've been very lucky that the DHSPA gave a wonderful gift of furniture, and we've been trying to really maximize the offerings that we have in there. So you can see some of the things that have happened during Wellness Week, just inspirational quotes to one another. I don't know if you can tell, but in one photo, a young lady is holding a guinea pig. We had the Darien Nature Center attend in January, and the kids really seem to enjoy it. So I just wanted to start with this quote because I want to ground some of my comments in kind of the work that's happening across the country and the need for mental health and how urgent it is. When we look at the Surgeon General of the United States, he's really identified 6 primary priorities that are current and that are most pressing. Of those 6, about 5 of them we'll touch upon within this presentation and the work that we're doing collectively around mental health. Of importance, he identifies social connection, that we are a community that tends to be a little bit more isolated, more technology kind of drives us apart when really what we need is to be together. Youth mental health is a driving force in the work that we do collectively as a nation. Workplace well-being, burnout, and COVID-19 follow-up. So just to really emphasize the importance of the initiative that you've taken in prioritizing mental health for our kids and integrating it into our community and our schools. So I think last time I met, I was on my 30, 60, 90, 120 countdown. And this is now day 371. I've hit the year mark. So I wanted to come back a little bit and take a step back in terms of what the charge was for me when you all decided that this was an important position to create. So when we look at it, there's kind of 5 buckets in which some of the responsibilities fall in. Obviously, curriculum and instruction. Everything we do is guided by how we facilitate learning in our children. So with that, we look at things like the SEL curriculum, including ruler, but also looking at the multi-tiered support system so that all of our kids can have social, emotional, and behavioral support to access the education as fully as they can. We also look at wellness and health curriculum. And then professional learning opportunities. So in order for our teachers to have access to our children's higher level thinking, they need to be well-regulated students, and our teachers need strategies in order to help their students stay regulated and focused. The same is true for our mental health staff. We are seeing unique needs emerge post-COVID, and it's important that our mental health staff continue to receive professional learning so that they can best meet the needs of all of our learners. The second bucket would really be there's legal and statutory compliance. As policies evolve, we have to stay up to date with them and make sure we're compliant. That includes being the district's climate coordinator, but also looking at restorative practices and SEL policies. Also serving as the family care coordinator. So when a family has a specific need, or if a school mental health professional needs to access support within the community, I'm available to kind of research some of those things and provide additional support. I also have the opportunity to participate on the curriculum leadership committee and work closely with Amy to make sure that there's a synergy between some of these legal and statutory compliance and the curriculum and instruction. Data analysis, I am a fan of data, so I was happy to see this one, looking at prevention, intervention, risk, and assessments, and making sure that we're looking at multiple types of data. We have quantitative data, we have qualitative data, we have a combination of both. And school climate, really looking at how we create a safe and secure environment for all of our kids to feel comfortable learning, taking academic risks when they need to, and growing overall. So we look at the policies, practices, and the budgeting related to school climate. And finally, I know that this position also came out of a time of great need in our community and great loss. And one of the beautiful things about Darien is we have things like the Thriving Youth. We have a mental health task force. We have the Depot. We have several community organizations. And part of my role was also to maintain that outreach. Make sure that we're complementing what else is being done in the community and facilitating that across families and the community and different agencies. Along with that too, family outreach, our athletic program liaison, that was another mandate, is really looking at athlete mental health. So that's another aspect that I've really focused on this year. I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm sure you know this very well. The strategic plan, I know you recently reviewed it, but just for a frame of reference, as I'm going through, I'm going to really highlight some of the primary initiatives that I've been focusing on in the past year and how they align both with the initial job description and the strategic plan. Is that for me? Yeah. Thank you. You're the best. So you'll notice as I go through, there will be little icons in the corner that correlate with the strategic plan and kind of the buckets that I mentioned around the job responsibilities. So one of the biggest initiatives that we're really undertaking is our school climate survey. Beginning in the 2025-2026 school year, the School Climate Committee in each public school has to annually administer a school climate survey, which when we think about the Thriving Youth data, it's always good to have follow-up data and get more information. So a small team of administrators over the summer looked at and explored several different school climate surveys, looked at the pros and cons, and really had some deliberation about what might make the most sense for the community. A school climate survey really provides kind of a 360-degree view of what our students feel, our families feels, and our staff feel with regards to safety, social emotional well-being, physical safety, what are our buildings like, is there enough supplies? And right now, last year we got our mental health grant for summer work. So the funding to run the school climate survey is coming out of a grant that we applied for at the end of last year. Beginning in April, we will distribute those surveys to staff, students, and families. Just as an example, the dimensions in which the school climate is measured. So we looked at safety, right? Physical safety, social emotional security, as I mentioned before. Do students feel comfortable? They feel comfortable with their peers. They feel comfortable with the administration in their classes and in the building, and online safety. So as we start to think about our goals around professional development and creating a safe school climate, this will very much be the data that will drive our initiatives for what we need to look at. The second dimension is teaching and learning, really how supported our learners feel. And then interpersonal relationships, both among teachers and students and among peers. How much respect there is for diversity in the community, and then institutional environment and leadership and efficacy. So I know we've talked about goals around communication in the strategic plan. Those will also be assessed through the school climate survey. The state has also included legislation that really looks at restorative practices as one of the functions for creating a safe school climate. At the bottom, you can see where I connected it to the current strategic plan goals. This hits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It also connects with instruction and learning mandates, but also our school climate. And to date, we have had about 8 individuals go to restorative practices training, with about 30 in total slated to go this year. A mix of administrators, a mix of teachers, and really the goal is that we create an environment where there's mutual respect. And by having an opportunity to create a strong community, we're less likely to see some of the negative behaviors that come when you don't have that sense of community. So I really like this. This is a quote from Mr. Rochtel, who really was the founder of restorative practices and really grounded in this idea that when we are working with our kids, we're creating structure and consistency. And those who are in positions of authority, we do things with kids, not necessarily to them or for them. So we don't want to be too strict in that they feel like they don't have ownership in their own learning. And we don't want to be too permissive in that they feel like people will do things for them. So just general feedback, some of the teachers that have gone already, one of them reached out to me and said, this is really like the glue that holds all of the work that we do. By creating that environment, we create an environment for learning and connection. Another one said the training was incredibly engaging and impactful, and I believe essential to the success of school communities on all levels. Unsolicited, just sign me up. I'd like to really run with this. So we're excited to have more opportunities and have more people train in the coming years. The state says by 2025, 2026, every staff member must have the opportunity to be trained in restorative practices. So we're ahead of the curve a little bit by doing it now. Again, this is just an overview of kind of what restorative practices is. And as I mentioned, really integrating how data informs kind of what we look at with the mental health needs of our students across grade levels. So one of the key takeaways of the Thriving Youth, and I appreciated, Sarah, I had the same reaction hearing some of those statistics. What more can we do, and how can we dovetail what's being done in the community within their school walls as well? And one of the takeaways from that survey is that we know that approximately 20%, 1 in 4 middle schoolers and high schoolers are struggling with really persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, anxiety. So what can we do to help support them in that? One of the things that we really leaned on this year was the initiation of the Teen Talk counselor at Darien High School. So I know you had some data. This is updated data up until March 19th. And you can see some of the presenting problems continue to overlap with some of the things that we've seen through the Thriving Youth Survey. Peer issues, anxiety, general mental health. Ashley, who's our Teen Talk counselor, has worked with 53 individual students and 375 individual counseling sessions, which I just think is pretty remarkable. And one of the biggest takeaways is that 43% of those that were seen self-referred. So we have kids who we're constantly, and we know that the data supports that even if a kid has one important connection to an adult, that is really a key indicator that's going to foster resilience. So we see that these kids have sought out support. Additionally, Teen Talk allows for greater parent interaction because they can have after-school sessions and conversations, unlike our other mental health staff. So 54 parent guardian support sessions. Another area where we've seen Ashley support is oftentimes we have an increasing number of kids, and this is consistent with data across Fairfield County and beyond, who become increasingly school avoidant. It is often very difficult for our own staff to do home visits that are time consuming. They might be pulled for other meetings. So she's really able to support that work. And she provides bilingual counseling. One of the things that came out of the Thriving Youth Survey is that there's certain populations that are not accessing services the same way. And one of those would be our individuals who are maybe multi-language learners or individuals who come from traditionally underrepresented communities. And Ashley is really pulling in approximately 21% of the students accessing services are from one of those groups. So while we have that current data, we'll also get data at the end of the year where with each student, Teen Talk collects data, Ohio Scales, which is a scale that really looks at problem severity and functioning. So we'll be able to see if there's any change in that over the course of the year. The students will provide satisfaction scores. Why did you come in and how are you feeling about it? And then there's also data regarding drug and alcohol use, which also came up at the Thriving Youth Survey. And hearing those statistics, we'll have a sense of what are we currently seeing. And then Ashley also rates on progress. Other data that's kind of driving where we are with mental health is the emergency data that we see out of Middlesex. These numbers represent, if we were to continue the rate at which they're being reported, they'd represent an increase over last year. And we've really talked about how important Teen Talk, one of the charges when I came here was let's look at Teen Talk for the high school and then consider the middle school. I think the results have been really promising in terms of the high school data. And when we look at the middle school, they're struggling with some of the same issues and the same rates of anxiety and depression. Again, in working with administrative staff, there's greater flexibility to respond to crisis. I think this also connects with, we did just launch anonymous alerts, and there is definitely a disproportionate number of submissions coming in from the middle school. And that means that we have to shift on the fly and kind of assess those kids in the moment. It also allows us to do more preventative work. When we have somebody available to respond to crisis, it allows our mental health staff to push in when needed to help support the teachers who are supporting the kids and doing classroom-wide behavioral supports instead of individual work with children. They will continue to do that, but it just provides more opportunity. And Teen Talk also, because they provide wraparound services, so over the summer, if a student needs extra support, if they need to connect with community agencies, they're able to do that. So the Wellness Center also started this year. You can see that on average, I just put in there the average daily usage. We just track number of visits, and typically 50% of the individuals come during the lunch period and then 25% on either side of the lunch period. It's just an example of some things that go on in the Wellness Center. We're planning ahead for Wellness Week, where Judy Phillips is putting together a bunch of different activities, including the SRO is going to do a safe driving workshop. They're going to have Everyone Loves the Dogs. The therapy dogs will be in there. And also art and music activities. They've also had, they had a showing of Taylor Swift and the Eras movie, which apparently went over really well. It was a good break. And it's a technology-free zone. So when we talk often about screen time and technology and its impact on mental health, oftentimes there isn't a space where kids have the opportunity to actually practice not using their phones. So I have to say I've been in there, and Judy is very diligent about encouraging kids to put their phones away, try something else, do Legos, build with Magnetiles, and it really builds that muscle for them to tolerate that urge to be able to not use the phone. So in November, we also administered the universal screening, the DESA. So the DESA is basically, it's an observational rating scale where the teacher just assesses in under a minute each student and their ability to engage in classroom activities that include self-awareness, self-management. And then we look at, is the student kind of in the typical range? Do they have strength in this area, or do they need a little bit more instruction so that they can be an active participant and productive student? It's administered in the fall, grades K through 8, and right now the second administration is also occurring, so we'll see rates of change after we get the second administration. In general, our kids, only 3% fall in the need for instruction range, but you can use the data to look at some trends. So what we saw was third grade was an area where there was a little bit of a spike, same with 8th grade. So in knowing that, we're able to support those teams a little bit more, check in with those teachers. We also saw that there's some disproportionality. Our students who receive free and reduced price lunch, their number goes up to 22% that were in need of instruction, which makes sense when we also think about our hierarchy of needs, right? If you are struggling with food scarcity, or you have other issues related to kind of the need for that support, your focus is often on your kind of primary biological needs first, and it might be a little bit more difficult to kind of focus on academics in that moment. So with regards to communication and community, a few things that to bridge that kind of home family connection with school and kind of some of the work that we're doing in school. I mentioned last time I was here that my goal was to do 4 workshops on parenting in each building. To date, I have 10 that I've conducted and another 8 in process. Most of them have been elementary and high school. Middle school, it's been a little bit slower to start, just scheduling wise. I also am able to provide didactic supervision for the high school and the middle school psychologists, social workers, and counselors, which previously was done by an external group. The athletic supports, as I mentioned, every season I go in and I work with the coaches. I kind of give an overview of the trends that we're seeing in mental health, who they can contact if they have concerns. Same is true for the support staff down there, the trainers. And I also have been able to go in and work with some individual teams. Next week, I'm meeting with another coach who's looking for, can we have some mental health support for one of our teams? We're also in process of putting together a panel, a sports mental health panel that will include, hopefully, a professional athlete, a sports psychologist, to talk about the unique needs of an athlete in a high achieving district and what it's like to balance athletics and continue that passion and love for the game. Additional trainings and connections include faculty meetings where we've talked about kind of ruler implementation, perfectionism. That was one at the high school where they were seeing a lot of issues around perfectionism and negative self-judgment. Continue to participate in the SRBI teams and the SEL committee and DEI work. Individual student and team meetings. Oftentimes, as I had mentioned, if there's a particular student who has a more clinical presentation, we just need to refer out for certain support, I'm happy to join the team, support the families in any way possible. We recently had training in the comprehensive school threat assessment, which actually the feedback from that I also got, someone said this was one of the best trainings. We often talk about policy. This really helps with procedurally what happens when a threat comes in. lots of, tabletop discussion, lots of here's the questions you would ask. It's a very structured, well-researched, well-organized approach to addressing threat and anonymous alerts, which, as I had mentioned, just kicked off yesterday. So, it's been a interesting we're working on some of the kinks, but you already see kids using it as a tool, an additional tool to help them feel safe and report hey, this is going on. I'd love to talk to someone about it, or just so you know. As I mentioned about that communication and the way in which we collect data. So these are just some examples when I'm starting some of those parent workshops, and I just ask, in the moment, what are some of the things as parents that you currently are struggling with? And you'll see a lot of the things that we've talked about: anxiety, even in young kids, technology, fitting in, friendships, a lot around technology, a lot around anxiety, boundaries, mood changes. And then this guide's the conversation. I have to say, I've been really grateful to have those parent workshops. I know there's conversations about whether or not to make them larger or smaller. There's been some really organic and wonderful conversations among parents about what it's like to raise a teenager or a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old during this time. Again, here's some of the community organizations that we continue to work with. I know Thriving Youth met this week, and we continue to have conversations. Mental Health Task Force was this morning. Human Services Planning Committee is tomorrow. So a lot of overlap in terms of how we can work together. Another focus has been on really developing and retaining well-qualified mental health providers. We have great psychologists and social workers, and there continues to be need. This is an area of need across the country, psychologists and social workers. So we were asked to be the only public school to be part of this consortium to develop a really robust training program in conjunction with the groups listed above. So in that, we've already secured one doctoral level candidate who has experience as a second grade teacher, as a school psychologist, who will come in next year as an intern and be able to provide support at the elementary level. We have 3 other interns that are interested in interviewing for the position. And so our goal is to not only provide the training, it's always great to have trainees around, but also so that they see what a great place Darien is to work and to be, and to support our families and our kids. So next steps. I've mentioned this before, but really creating a comprehensive multi-tiered system of supports for our students. I think that this is a lengthy project. It really looks at what each school, and right now that's where we are in gathering the information with what each school is doing and how do we bring it together in a cohesive way, the same way we have done with our math and literacy. Professional learning, continue to develop our capacity to help each other through, whether that's our professional learning communities within the psychologists, social workers realm, but also our ongoing training, taking in experts from outside to continue to grow that, continuing looking for opportunities for parent and community partnerships, again, recruitment and retention. We're also in the process of reviewing, I know there's policies that are coming up, and also looking at procedurally what those look like so that our staff feel like, here's the policy and here are the steps I need to move forward. As we get the school climate data, we're in the process. We will collect that data starting in the next few weeks. Once we get the data, then each building will look at that data and then figure out what additional professional development or support we might need around that. And then also curriculum review and revision. So what are we doing with SEL, but also advisory, flex, and health? Even thinking about some of the things that came up at Thriving Youth, where can we have more conversations about safety around alcohol use and driving, health classes, advisory periods, and integrating that information. And I think that's it. So I know that was a lot, and I apologize if it's hard to hear. So I'm happy to take any questions if you do have any.
Okay, I'll open it up to board questions. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. Just one question I have is, you have a lot of material and you've mentioned you love data. I'm just curious how you plan to measure the effectiveness of these different programs, and if you're planning to try to use different pieces of data, because we have lots of surveys and focus groups and everything, how we can do that so we can continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the thing with the school climate survey is it's meant to be administered. It's a circular kind of, you administer it, then you figure out what you need to work on. Then for that year, that school, the district will work on it for that year. Then you'll see if your targeted interventions correlate with any changes in the school climate survey. I do think focus groups are helpful. I also think that there are some other ways in which like informal data collection is also important, because when I meet with parents and qualitatively they're able to say, my kid came home and they discussed this, that's also important data. So I think we have like, you know, laboratory data and statistics and numbers, and we also have the qualitative data that's equally important. So I think by setting some of these systems in place, we have the opportunity to then look at data over time, which we haven't had that particular measure up until this point.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, Sarah.
Thank you, Alicia. This was really informative. Apologies if I missed it. The school climate survey is administered to parents, staff at all schools. Elementary school students will be administered the survey too?
So grades 3 through 5 will take it as a self-report, but families in every elementary school will get it.
Okay, but K to 2, there, I mean, that you can't. get
No,
that. Okay.
and they keep the questions consistent so you can track over time. So yeah, K through 2
Yeah, okay.
won't get it. Mhm.
John?
So I recently had a couple of weeks to listen to a lot of podcasts, and the book Bad Therapy seems to be getting a lot of press these days. And I'm not going to ask if you read it, but just the concept of overlaying mental health support services to every child in a almost equal measure. You know, I think the argument is it certainly helps a number of kids with distinct needs, but we might be hurting kids. And it's a popular book, and that's why I raise it. I mean, can you just talk to that concept a bit?
Sure. I think there's a difference between direct mental health intervention and creating through social emotional learning and awareness,
Okay.
right? Like one is that's why creating a multi-tiered system of support is so important, because universally, right? It's also when our kids are regulated. If you ask, you know, you have a student who's really connected with their teacher, they're going to put in a lot more effort, and we actually have data to show that the teacher ends up being a better teacher. So that relationship fosters learning in general for all students. So I think then when you move up the tier, you go through, you have an SRBI team, MTSS team that will say, what does this particular student then need? So I think what happens is, you know, there's a difference between providing targeted mental health support and creating a resilient community. And I think that differentiation is important.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Katie?
I'd be interested to know some of the buckets that are included in the survey. And it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but if, you know, and just how that might get reported back, if it will be high level, if just be interested to see like what it covers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's those 14 dimensions that were within the 5, but then generally we look at kind of trends to see things too, like, so we might look at some demographic data. So we know some of the things that came out from Thriving Youth. We might want to say, okay, where are we stand now with our, you know, individuals who are multi-language learners? Like, do we still see that playing out 3rd through 6th? So we can look at it kind of at a high level, and then as needed, dig a little deeper.
Greg?
Yeah, thanks again for the presentation. Really helpful, and hearing you talk through is even more helpful. You talked a little bit about adding teams to create a more resilient community, or create a resilient community. How do we not? How have we determined that we don't already have a resilient community? I mean, we're the #1 high school in the state, extremely successful. I look at the survey results. I don't really know what the numbers mean. 20 to 25% anxiety. I think if you pull adults in the community, you'd probably be higher than that. So like, how do we know we're not already at a good place and we're not just adding people just for the sake of adding people?
I'm not sure, like adding teams. I think teams are in place. It's having the teams that are there look at the data that's coming from like the climate survey. And when you look at resilience, I think it's also, yes, our kids are doing really well, and there is a mental health crisis that they're experiencing. The level of stress and anxiety is higher than ever before. I mean, I think I had mentioned that right now, kids are experiencing anxiety and depression that's equivalent to an inpatient individual in the 1950s. So there is a trend, and that's why, nationally it's been an issue, but also, within our community, I think it's about building resilience. It's not looking at necessarily a consistent deficit model, but how do we help our kids find balance?
So can you talk a little, I mean, this is probably a bigger topic, but can you talk a little bit about the drivers of what's actually the root cause of that? Because that's not just a Darien thing, that's a nationwide thing. And I know I've asked you the question before around the utilization of smartphones and technology and screen time. Is that a direct cause? And are we addressing that issue if it is?
Yeah. So, the whole issue of cause versus correlation, correlationally, like if you look at it, the advent of the, smartphone in 2007 aligns with some of the challenges. And there's also additional factors. COVID really did change a trajectory for a lot of our kids, and some of the factors that help them build resilience and be more connected. So I wish I could say there was like a single factor. There was already a trajectory that was happening before COVID, then COVID. And so I think that's where looking at kind of how do we come together as a community in a multifaceted way, look at how we intervene. It is a larger conversation, always one that I'm happy to engage in. But I think, we'll get more information from our kids directly when we ask them, do you feel safe? Do you feel secure? Some of the questions in the school climate survey, I think, will help with that too. Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia, and we want to get you out of here. One quick thing, I would love to see a list of the presentations. I don't know that they're posted anywhere yet, but I'd love to see what's happened already and have access to them. I think it'd be great to have a place where they're stored that's easily found. To the climate survey, I'm curious what we will be able to glean from the findings about kids' view of their future, if possible, because it's wonderful to understand how they feel in the moment, but is there any way to understand how that makes them feel about what's next, as far as being hopeful and, recognizing possibilities and potential and that kind of thing, which I think you need to feel safe and secure to be able to see, but can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the things is this is a nationally administered kind of very standard measure, and that data is meant to then also drive other ways in which you gather data. So it might be through focus group, it might be through follow-up. I don't know that this will exactly touch upon that, but I think it's the springboard to have further conversation. Okay, how do we connect this, your current feelings of safety and security, to what you see for the future? So while it's not directly assessed in here, I think we get information that helps, whether it's smaller groups, whether it's additional survey questions, whether it's targeted. We'll see, okay, well, maybe this particular grade is an area where we need to focus on this, and this grade we need to focus on something else. So I definitely think it's a really important question to ask. Hopefulness is a very important factor for resilience. And
Alicia, how did we come up with the National Schools Climate Center? Why is that who we selected, and how did you find them? And
sure.
Do other people, how widespread is the use of the specific?
Yeah, so they are very widespread in Connecticut. Like I know, not New Canaan uses it. It's a common, we narrowed it down to 2. The other one was significantly more expensive. And after consulting, I'm also part of an interdistrict mental health provider. So I close contact with people from Westport, from New Canaan, from Greenwich, from Fairfield, and we all came together and I kind of asked a lot of them, what are the pros and cons of the ones that you use, and would you use it? So that helped guide it. And then when we looked, and they have also additional resources like for data interpretation if needed, they jump in. They've been incredibly responsive. I heard from another district, another group that they used. It's been more expensive and they've gotten less feedback. So really just our team kind of looked at about 3 and then narrowed it down to 2 and then decided that this one was the most relevant. And
The other point is, since this one, you can't really change it supposedly, right? It allows us an opportunity to norm against other districts, locally, nationally, so on.
Katie?
Alicia, I'm so sorry. You would think I was the one that was sick. I'm just now catching on to the fact that this is an administered survey, not one that we're creating in-house. So I apologize. That's why I was asking you about the buckets. So to update my question then, how will this survey address Darien specific things and things that we're concerned about, appreciating the value of what Dr. Adley just mentioned and these buckets. But I'm curious about things that we know are going on in our own community. You know, there have been parents who have raised concern about start times at the high school, right? Obviously, smartphones are one. You know, another one that I hear about is how difficult it is to be absent and making up work. So I'm just curious about how we might capture important data that is unique to our community.
Yeah. I don't think this is an exhaustive survey. I think the state says you have to use a standardized, well-referenced, normed instrument. So the option is it would be a large undertaking to standardize our own measure and analyze the data, like a multi-year process. And this does have to, by 2025, 2026, we need to do it annually. That's not to say we might not do that at some point, but this is a starting point. And I think then it might also, there are other surveys, other ways that we can kind of get at some of this information. I think we need the standardized questions. That's part of what the state asked for to set that benchmark, which will then guide our school climate, but it's not exhaustive either. I think those conversations continue to happen. And
So you're saying then that you'll expect to come back to us after this has been administered and sort of analyzed and understood, then you'll take that data and kind of look at like, what else do we need to do here?
So what'll happen is each building, their school climate committee will look at their data too. And then so each building will go look at their data and look at it specific to their needs and and that will then guide their school improvement plan each year. And then they'll come back and we'll give it again, or we'll say, you know what, we really need a follow-up group around this particular area.
Thank you very much, Alicia. We appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you. If I may just say one, how unwell just feeling, that's the first thing, but I will share with you that we're very appreciative of Alicia's position. And I can tell you from our students to the staff to families, Alicia is highly thought of and making a difference around the district in this arena. So thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you for prioritizing such a position. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to discussion and possible action on establishing a 2024 Darien High School graduation date.
So we have 2 snow days. And that would typically push us from Wednesday, June 12th, which was the original date for graduation, set early in the year, tentative date, to Friday, June 14th. And that would seem to be fairly straightforward. So tonight is an opportunity either to consider it and not make a decision until April. I would, if it's 6 of one, half a dozen other, I would suggest that it'd be nice to get information to families before the holiday, if possible. So I would advocate for that if the discussion is not long and arduous. State law allows you to do this essentially. Actually, you could set it at the start of the year for, in this case, it was going to be Wednesday, June 12th. So you can even set that date as a solid date if you wanted to at the start of the year. I think that's a wee bit more problematic, to be honest with you. But the recommendation here before us is not just straightforward. It's instead of the Friday night, with a recommendation to have it on Thursday. One of the primary reasons for making that recommendation at the high school is that it provides an opportunity to have a rain check day. Because often we hear you haven't planned for something else or otherwise. So that might mean that if Thursday, I don't know, at noontime or something like that, and the weather's not cooperating, we would then rolling over to the Friday night at 5 o'clock. Now, Friday night could be just as bad, and then we have it inside, right? So that doesn't preclude it altogether, but it increases the possibility of having it outside. Now, inside's a beautiful, like there's the ceremonies inside are also very nice, but outside just accommodates more people. So it's just traditionally, I think it's a better opportunity for people to participate. So we're looking. The recommendation is that to have it on Thursday. You may recall that teachers don't have an act in the contract. We eliminated their last preparation day. So if it's on Friday, that's the last day. Are we worried about participation of staff? Well, if it's their last day, they might be more inclined to come on the Thursday night. That's the Friday. But that being said, that's the secondary reason for it. There is an incremental cost for it. It's just $3,700. I would offset that through superintendent adjustments to some of the high school accounts. The major reason for that, there's a wee bit of a rental equipment for Thursday and potentially Friday. Although the company for renting the chairs and so on and so forth are not charging us twice, so it's a fairly small amount. It does kick back the middle school moving up ceremony, graduation ceremony to the Wednesday. But traditionally, the students came back for an extra day. They'll be coming back for 2 days. We don't see a problem with that administratively. There's enough for the students to do between giving stuff back and continuing their work. I wouldn't see that as fairly straightforward. So the recommendation tonight is to have a set graduation for the Thursday evening.
Board questions?
I have a question.
Sarah?
So as a mother of an 8th grader, I am curious how having 2 days with that after you've moved up is going to be tricky to get personally get my child to school. Could there be a possibility of doing an afternoon ceremony for middle school and evening for the high school?
I just think that's too heavy a lift for our staff.
That was the answer.
It's just too heavy a lift for the maintenance custodial and something. Yeah, that's just the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just add, having had an 8th grade and a 12th grade graduation last year, that would have been a heck of a day to try to do it all in one day. It would have been a lot.
Okay. Are we comfortable moving forward with it? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave. It is. So I'll take that as Mr. Brown motioning. Is there a second? Okay, Julie seconds. Okay, all those in favor
Favor of Thursday. Is that what we're
of
voting?
setting the graduation date? Yes.
For Thursday.
With
Yes,
the
let me
understanding
read
if it's
the
a rain
motion.
date, it will be
Yeah.
Friday.
Let me read me the actual motion. May I have a motion to approve June 13th, 2024 as the 2024 Darien High School graduation date? Mr. Brown moved, Julie seconded for Mrs. Best. All that I believe was unanimous. Yes, thank you all.
Thank you. I think the community will be appreciative of the date before the break. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to discussion on February 2024 financial report and possible action on proposed transfers. Rich.
Can you just put the PowerPoint up?
The power.
So this is the financial report through February. Through February, we are forecasting a deficit of $162,652. The general education RCs are forecasting a positive $278,000, while the special education RCs are forecasting a deficit of $441,000. Overall salaries do have a positive variance of just over $9,000. Again, we did fall short on turnover by about $324,000. We do have salary savings of just over $255,000, savings in clubs and councils of $67,000, and savings from the new custodial contract of just over $11,000. The operating account is forecasted at a deficit of $268,732. It is primarily coming from special education consultant services and special education tuition. Fixed cost is a positive variance of just over $200,000. We do have positive balances in utility accounts such as electricity, heat, and water, and then health insurance is a positive $75,000. Equipment is a positive $16,849. We have some small savings in technology purchases, furniture, and science equipment. Revenue is forecasted at a deficit of 122,000. This is primarily associated with excess costs, which is forecasting a deficit of 145,000. The reimbursement rate is tentatively set at 68%. We did receive the first reimbursement installment of just over $2 million in February. So we do have two transfers for the board to consider. The first is for $139,317. This would cover in full the RBT deficit and consultant services. We are recommending taking funds from snow removal, water, heat, ELP tuition, which has exceeded expectations, technology repairs, sewer cost, unemployment, sessions, adult education, and use of fields. And then the second transfer is for $24,000, and this is due to the increased cost of valuations. We are recommending taking funds from equipment and technology, salary savings in non-certified staff, unemployment insurance, and equipment and furniture.
Any questions? Julie?
I'm not sure if this is the right moment for this, but Rich, would you happen to know if we are seeing tech repair costs going down since we switched to bring your own device?
So the repairs that have gone down has primarily been at the middle school. So we did hire a technician who's very well versed in fixing Chromebooks. And so rather than sending them out, he's been able to do a lot of the repairs in-house.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. With that, may I have a motion to approve the February budget transfers? Sarah moves, Robin seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Oh, later. Okay.
Jill, just one thing, and just in the finance committee, it did come up about the pupil evaluations. I just wanted to confirm if we are going to be
Yes,
having
we-
some kind of an update on.
Yes, yeah, right.
Oh,
Charlie, could you just, between the both of you? So the question was of the pupil evaluations, the expenses associated with that, and does it flag anything else?
Yeah. There's actually a difference between, there were about 12 more additional evaluations in that line this year from last year. And they seem to be due to an increase in some clinical needs, psychiatric evaluations, as well as neuropsychs. We are monitoring that. It may be that it's just a higher level of need right now, and we don't know that it will indicate whether students require a higher level of service till we work through those evaluations. But there's a difference between 12 evaluations at this time. They have doubled in price. I think I mentioned that at a prior meeting. Actually, some of them have exceeded doubling in price.
thank you.
Is there anything different in the nature of what we're seeing in terms of, you mentioned degree of need. Is there anything to flag, not in terms of individual students, but in terms of things that we would be preparing for? We've talked about student need growing in certain cases.
I think the nature is also in some secondary, also increased psychiatric evaluations and neuropsychs. There also is a small delta for outside evaluations due to our shortage of psychologists. So some evals had to be done because we didn't have the proper staffing due to staff shortages.
Okay, thank you. Thanks on that. Okay. Okay. Yes, Katie.
Understanding if now is not the time to get into this, but I did just want to mention that it would be great to talk a little bit about the rising costs of the consultant services as well in special education at a future point.
Okay. Rich and Shirley, is that something we could see in an upcoming finance meeting? Sort of how it looks. Thank you. Okay, discussion and possible action on special appropriation request for fiscal year 25 special education transportation expenditures. This is back on our desks because we had primarily two questions come from the Board of Finance after they reviewed it. The first question was whether or not we would consider using a defined contribution plan, and Rich can walk through the implications of that. And then the second was whether or not there were any additional efficiencies if we looked at routing, vehicle mix, how we, leasing versus buying. And Rich took a look at a lot of those. And so tonight, the two questions in front of us are to get back to the Board of Finance and answer whether or not what we think the implications of defined contribution are, and if we would be okay with that. firstly, and secondly, if there's any change in our appropriation ask.
So we were asked, as Jill mentioned, to take a look at the type of vehicles. So we did look at what's called a Sprinter van. Those are typically like the type of vans you might see doing like airport shuttles. So there are not a lot of districts. We could only find one district who actually uses Sprinter vans, and that's ACES, which is Arrest in Hamden. So of the 5 in-district routes that we recommended, 3 would make sense for a potential Sprinter van, and we did kind of carve out what the population on that bus would look like and what the available capacity would look like. The other 2, while we could make the capacity work, it would leave you with only 1 available seat on each of those buses, which doesn't really give you a lot of capacity should things change and needs fluctuate. So considering Sprinter vans are slightly less expensive, it does have a better fuel mileage. They are individual bench seats. There is no steps for the students to climb, and then the endorsement is, less difficult for a driver to get. You only need a V endorsement, which is similar to the endorsement you would have for a Suburban as opposed to a B endorsement. A Sprinter van would be a good option for 3 of the 5 vehicles. We would recommend maintaining the 2 buses for the other 2 vehicles that have higher student loads on them. In terms of looking at leasing and buying, there is no option really to lease. The only option would be to purchase. We did include for reference some of the quotes that we did get for both Sprinter vans and the Type 2 buses, as well as the wheelchair vans, Suburbans. In terms of the pension cost, so we did include in the Board of Finance notes our pay comparison versus for a student's pay comparison. So we do pay less currently than a driver for a student. One of the big draws in terms of why we're able to get candidates has been the pension. Also, another draw is we don't lay them off during breaks. And so first student drivers do get laid off during Christmas break. They get laid off during spring break. Those who don't actually work in the summer get laid off as well. And so not doing that is also a nice draw in order for us to recruit. If we wanted to consider a defined contribution plan, our recommendation would be to increase the wage from $28 an hour to $30 an hour. The trade-off really is, are you looking to have short-term expenses for long-term savings, or would you rather have the short-term savings for long-term costs with the town pension plan? There are non-union employees, so we would have the ability to put them in a defined contribution plan. The town would have to amend the current defined contribution plan document, as it only specifies SSOs as being the only employees who can enter that plan. So we would need the town to amend that. But if that's a consideration for the board, if they're open to having a higher starting wage and then a defined contribution plan, that is something that's doable.
Start with the defined contribution. How does that work, given that we have some drivers that we've already hired in? What would you do?
So those drivers would be in the current town pension plan. They've already been contributing since their start time. I will say, even though we've had drivers since 2016, no driver has actually ever vested in the town pension plan. It is a 5-year vest. And so while it is a draw, nobody's actually made it to that level where they vested. So it would only be the employees who are potentially hired starting next school year.
Okay, still on defined contribution, John?
Just on recruitment, I mean, is that going to make it much more difficult to recruit, or you think just with the added wages that would offset the shift in?
I think the added wages would help. I mean, that's the first thing that somebody recognizes. I will say all of our drivers have 2 jobs. So they're not just working here. They all have second jobs somewhere else, which is why we typically don't benefit health insurance. That's not a big draw for them. I think a $30 wage would get us. When Marge does her personal action report, you'll see that we replaced 2 drivers relatively quickly. We do have a good connection out in Fairfield County to drivers who are willing to come here and willing to work here. So I do think we could still recruit at $30 an hour and defined contribution.
Yeah, thank you.
Robin?
Just one question on the wage. I noticed you said the existing drivers that we have that are on the defined contribution plan, we're getting a wage of between 32 to 36.
No, so the 32 to 36 are first student drivers, so not our
okay, I'm
drivers.
sorry. All right.
And so for those drivers, some are in a defined contribution. It's a 3% match with no vesting period. They do have some drivers who are on a defined benefit plan. That's something that first student has grandfathered out. But for those drivers who have been in the district for many, many years, they are on a defined benefit.
And our defined contribution plan is not a 3%, but it's a 5.55.
So it's a 5.55.
Right.
Just one more question. In the notes for the Board of Finance, you also had said that we have some longer-term drivers that are on the town pension plan, but all of the new drivers now are being transitioned or have been hired with defined contribution.
No, so the only employees in the district who are on a defined contribution are the SSOs. That was done to potentially allow retired Darien police officers to work here while they're collecting their town pension. So the only employees currently who are set up are those SSOs. Because they're unaffiliated employees and not in a union, we could make the decision to put new employees in a defined contribution plan or non-union employees. Union employees, however, which are not the transportation employees, would have to be negotiated by the town.
John?
I think there's just a general desire to move in business and in public service, move people from defined benefits to defined contributions. So as Rich put it, yeah, it will cost us slightly over the short term, but it brings taxpayers a long-term benefit.
Correct. It'll bring your long-term liabilities down. One of the things we saw this year was roughly a $200,000 increase in the overall pension contribution that has to be made for non-certified staff. So as more transition off of a defined benefit to a defined contribution, your long-term liability should shift down.
So unless somebody objects, I think we're very comfortable going back to the Board of Finance saying that we are very comfortable using a defined contribution model. And they just would need to know that our operating costs will go up slightly when they review our budget. And we'll have those numbers for them, which is all ready to go, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yep, so it's already in the packet.
it's already in the packet.
So the appropriation request could fluctuate a little bit. So our suggestion is to keep it at the 850.
So let's do that one now. So we
Right.
just did defined contribution.
Okay.
Fire away.
Well, that's the summary of it there in a nutshell, right? So the 3 Sprinter vans, 2 Type 2, 2 Suburbans, 2 wheelchairs could potentially come in a little bit lower than the 850, just giving us a wee bit of wiggle room, depending on how what services Richard uses to purchase this. We're saying potentially could we just do the 850 and we'll see. There's a wee bit of flexibility in there potentially if we're doing the Sprinter vans.
Julie?
Can we talk about the vehicle
Yes.
mix? Thank you. Can you give us any more color on why Sprinter vans aren't generally used for school transportation? And I ask this because I'm wondering about the user experience. Are you climbing over people to get in and out of the car? Is it harder these are young students often, and to load and unload that vehicle versus a bus with an aisle with only 2 seats together? It seems like a different animal.
So it is a little different. So the school bus, the Type 2, is you have that aisle down the middle like that you're used to with the typical school bus. Sprinter van, the walkway is towards the edge of the vehicle against the windows on the road, the windows and the seats. We did talk to Dr. McCarthy in special ed if he thought any of the individuals who are getting in district transportation would have any difficulties. He didn't seem to think they would. They're also smaller. So a lot of districts don't have an in-district fleet of vehicles. Most contract out with First Student or STA or DATCO. So they're used to the more typical school bus, the yellow school bus that you see. Some of the private industry transportation companies have started to use what's called Sprinter vans. They're not necessarily associated with school, but they do take school children on trips, mostly out of district. The difference really is the capacity of the bus. Are you comfortable with 28 capacity or 15? Obviously, once you hit that 15, it's like having a full school bus, right? So with the 28 passenger bus, and depending on the tier that we're in, typically it's 12 students is the max that you'll see. And then you add in a bus monitor, potentially a nurse, 14 people plus the driver. It's not a full bus. And so that's one of the reasons we didn't recommend the 5. While you could make technically 5 work, it'd be a tight bus.
If I may follow up real quick, thank you. I did some extensive research on Google, and the Sprinter vans I found were all 12-seaters. Are these not your average Sprinter?
So there are 12 seaters and there's 15 seaters.
Okay.
So Chevy Sprinter vans are they're like the Chevy Express ones. They're typically 12. Ford makes a Ford Transit. Those can be 12, and depending on
I
what you
trust
get,
you. I just
15.
want-
I'm sure you did more than.
So while we're
Google's.
not necessarily saying we're going to get Mercedes, which is what you saw in the packet, those are almost all 15. The reason we did include the Mercedes one is so in the dealers that we reached out to Mercedes, we reached out to Chevy, we reached out to Ford. They were the only ones who actually were willing to come back with a firm quote. So while we have it at the 71, it could be that we get a Ford Transit vehicle that has a 15 capacity, and it could be less, it could be more depending on the quote.
As long as we know that they will meet and serve the needs of the students who need them, that's the key thing.
Katie and then John.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. Rich, can you talk a little bit about the shift from the type 2 to the Sprinter vans in terms of that long-term lens, right? We were just talking about it in benefits, but I'm curious too about capacity, right? That if we are sort of planning for tight, full transportation, how might that look in the next year or two?
So that's one of the reasons we didn't recommend doing all 5 Sprinter vans. So the 2 that we're not recommending, you'd be at 14 of a 15 passenger, including potentially a nurse and a monitor. So that doesn't give you any flexibility should you see anything shift. The ones that we're recommending are typically between 6 and 8 students on the given tier. And so while they might have 30 on the bus, it's really about the tiers, right? So the tiers being, are they going to the high school and middle school is tier 1? Are they going to Hindley, Tokenique, and Royal for tier 2, and then Oxford and Holmes? We want to make sure that there's at least, good 4 to 5 seats available should something change. Because otherwise you're going to be sitting here either having to buy another vehicle or contract out to somebody to cover you, which is one of the reasons we're not saying you should do all 5 across the board.
So one more on capacity. These numbers and the seating arrangements, I appreciate that you were factoring in the support staff. This is also allowing for adequate storage space, backpacks, projects, whatever kids are.
Correct.
Yeah, obviously wheelchairs, but
So they anybody with a wheelchair would go in the wheelchair van, not the Sprinter van, because these are not able to lift the wheelchairs up.
are we considering the full scope of what children will need to, yeah.
Yeah, so there's, even though it might not look like it, there is trunk space should we need something, whether it's a musical instrument or something like that. And the seats are either kind of like bucket seats or captain seats. And so there is available space there for a student, but whether it's their book bag or something else.
John.
My question was Katie's, so thank you.
Done.
Sorry, so I'm in the same vein as Katie with this. So do we have any historical data to show that what our growth rate has been the last 3 years versus, obviously we can't, what's the past is not the future, but can we look at how much we've grown? If we had done this 3 years ago, would we be at capacity, or how much growth would we have had?
So had you done this 3 years ago, you'd have a little bit more room. So you've grown a little bit, especially post-COVID in terms of special ed transportation. So even if you were to grow more, you'd still have that capacity in those 3 vehicles. If you were to look back, 7 or 8 years ago, you probably had even less kids on the bus. And so you've been able to fulfill that capacity. Again, if we did all 5, you would not be able to do that.
What's the life cycle of the Sprinter van, Rich? The bike type 2 is 8 to 10 years, right?
So these should be about 8 to 10 years.
Also.
You'd maintain them similar to a Suburban. So the maintenance on them, as long as you do your oil changes, you do your brake changes and your fluids, and you maintain it just like a car. We're not going to use them for high volume miles because they're all within district. So it's not like they're driving like the Suburbans who might go to Hamden, for example, or Fairfield. They're really primarily all within district.
Okay.
Do these affect the parking at all? Are they easier to park than the type 2? Does it change?
They are easier to maneuver. So we would likely, if we want to go in the Sprinter van, just make an amendment to the special permit that we filed with P&Z to indicate that it would also include Sprinter vans.
Can you update us? I think it's in the packet, but update us on the P&Z, where we are and what we filed for, please.
So we did file 2 special permits with P&Z. One is to change the special permit that's in place that allows us to park 6 Suburbans here at central office to 8. So that public hearing, I believe, is April 23rd, the same day as the board meeting here. And then a second special permit was filed to park 7 vehicles at Building 16 on Thorndale Circle, the Fitch property. And so that would, is originally filed for the 5 Type 2s and the 2 wheelchair vans. If we decide to go for the sprinters, it would be 2 Type 2s, 3 sprinters, and then 2 wheelchair vans. So that we did get a 1-year lease proposal from Jerry Nielsen, who owns those properties. So if all goes through, we can do with that. We have been looking at other properties, not in Darien. We did find a lot in Norwalk who's willing to rent us space that would be able to park these vehicles in a gated property with a camera. It is a little bit more expensive at $24,000 a year as opposed to $6,300 a year. And it would have a more than a 1-year commitment. So that's an option that's available to us. In terms of its location in Norwalk, it's kind of like between exit 13 and 14. So it's only about 5 minutes or so from Tokenique. So well within, reasonable drive.
P&Z also shared that they would waive the traffic study.
Julie?
Thanks. I'm sorry if you covered this, Rich, but would the drivers for the Sprinter vans require the same class of license and get all the same training, et cetera, as a bus driver?
So they would require a V endorsement, which is the same endorsement that a Suburban driver gets. A Type 2 driver has to get a CDL and a B or a PS endorsement, which is a little bit more. In terms of all the training, they have to have all the same safety training, all the same, training in terms of doing your pre-check of your vehicle. So all the training is the same, but it is slightly a different endorsement.
Thank you.
Dennis?
Replacement cycles for the fleet. Have we worked that out of what that would look like in 8 to 10 years, kind of thing, and that we're comfortable that it won't have a massive blip every 8 to 10 years?
Sure. So we can map that out. Our expectation is, even though we're buying 7 vehicles or potentially buying 7 vehicles this year, we wouldn't be looking to replace them all in 7 years. We'd likely start phasing them in between year 8 and 9, then 10, and then 11. Depending on the miles. If we look at the Suburbans that were first purchased in 2016, the first replacement, they were both bought at the same time. The first replacement is scheduled for this upcoming budget cycle, and then the next one for the other. So we're trying to stagger them so we don't see that big spike, but we can create a map out.
Thank you.
So 2 questions in front of us, actually. Number 1, are we interested in moving forward with the change to the model because it may or may not affect the appropriation ask? And then 2, do we want to adjust the appropriation ask? You're recommending no, but are we comfortable with the Sprinter model? It's the administrative recommendation.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So Alan and Rich, you're thinking that we should stay at $850 because you think there's some potential fluctuation in price. Rich, can you talk to that?
So the reason we're saying $850 is so while the 2 Type 2s that we're recommending to purchase through the cooperative purchasing agreement at $103, depending on the timing, there still is no guarantee that we could get them at $103. On a worst case scenario, it could be $127. So at that point, you'd be picking up, another $25,000, give or take, of each vehicle. So that $750 could turn into $800. If we are able to get them at the $103, then we could stay at the $750. So the $71 for the Sprinter vans was based on a price point that the dealership in Connecticut was able to give us. We would have to put that out to bid because it isn't on a state bid or a state contract. And so there's still no guarantee that they will hold that price if they are the low bid between now and when we're ready to purchase. And so while I wouldn't expect it to go from $71 to $100,000, it gives you a little bit of flexibility should those prices shift. And then if we don't spend it all, then it just goes back to the 10.
What would be the time frame by which, given that I understand that we have to go through the RTM process, which would bring us to May 9th. But given that, what would be the earliest that we would know what our final prices are? Is it basically still May 9th? Because
So it will depend on who has the vehicles and when we can commit a purchase order. So nobody's going to hold our price until we actually give them a purchase order, which commits us to pay. I will say the vehicles that are more of a concern really are the Type 2 buses. The Suburbans are available. The Sprinter vans, while not everybody sells commercial Sprinter vans, the Mercedes dealership that we talked to has them on the lot. It doesn't mean they will have them on the lot come May. But I think we won't have as difficult time securing vehicles like that because they're a little bit more common. The ones that the lead time is more of an issue is those Type 2 buses because you only have so many avenues to go to.
okay.
Can I ask that?
Sure. Yeah.
I guess the question is, if you're going into the RTM meeting and approval looks likely, will you have a better sense of the pricing?
So I think what,
Day of?
so if there is like support to go forward with the Sprinter van, one of the things we could do is we can issue the RFP and just not award.
Okay.
And then time those prices to come in. And then if the RTM says no, or the Board of Finance says no, we just don't award. And then when the RTM votes, if they vote yes, at that point, we should have a good idea of what that price.
So they could cut the appropriation if it came in much lower at
They
the
could,
RTM.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I was getting at. Okay, thank you.
And you think we would know by that date, so we could say on May 9th.
I think we would be able to have a good idea.
Thank you. All right, so it sounds like the recommendation is to stay with the 850. Does anybody differ from that? Okay. We do. Oh, do we have to? We really don't have to have a vote because we already have asked for 850.
Okay.
While the details have changed, the appropriation ask stands. So we can, Rich is prepared with the follow-up. But we don't have to vote.
Okay.
Which means we don't have to go back to any other boards either.
Yeah.
Because we did go to because this is a capital request, we have been to Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM committees. So now we really don't have to go through another round, though we will explain that we're changing some of the operational components. Okay. Next agenda item. Thank you. Discussion and possible action on special appropriation request for fiscal year 25 school security expenditures. This is something we've talked about in executive session a number of times, and we just have talked about the timeframe for bringing it forward. The Board of Finance wanted to see this in time for to consider it as part of their overall budget vote, which is April 9th. So, you've got some options here. Rich, you want to?
Sure. So we do want to point out that one of the two items that we discussed has increased in price by about $24,000. So you'll see the appropriation request is $1,074,000, which is $24,000 higher. So there are really three options to consider. One is to request a special capital appropriation in the amount of $1,074,000 to fund school security initiatives. So if you were to go that route, the Board of Ed would have to approve it, and then would go to the Board of Selectmen for approval, and assuming that they approve, it would go to the Board of Finance for approval. And then if they were to approve it, it would go to the RTM for approval. The second option is to amend the Board of Ed's capital request to $2,548,900, which would include the $1,074,000. We would not provide descriptions or discussion of the items in public. If the other boards had questions, we would go into executive session as we have in the past. That obviously delays the timing of the project. I will say, given the delay, it's not likely that the project would be finished before the start of the school year. And while it doesn't necessarily have to, because we can have vendors and we have had vendors do this type of work off hours, obviously it's nicer to have it done and it's a little bit cleaner when you can have it all done in the summer. It's likely would spill over into the September, October timeframe. Option 3 is to increase the board's capital budget request by $124,000 and just purchase one of the items that has been discussed and then delay the other to a future year. And those are really the three options to consider.
Okay. If we move forward with option 1 and the Board of Finance disagrees, they can execute on option 2 and move it into our budget. So, I would recommend we keep the same time frame, unless people, at a minimum.
I would agree.
Yeah. John, do you have a comment over there?
I guess it's tough to discuss this without defining which is which outside of executive session, but given one of the projects is not going to come to fruition in HHR for a number of years, I've kind of looked at option 3 as a viable alternative by putting forth the smaller security appropriation. And then I guess the question, Rich, is if you were to pool, I know the HHR bidding for that security enhancement is in place, but if you were to do like another 3 schools along, would that increase any capital efficiencies or installation efficiencies possibly? If you did like 6 schools and
I mean, potentially you could have some benefits with labor because all the labor would already be on site. I wouldn't think you'd get any benefits from the materials itself, but potentially labor.
I mean, that's kind of why I'm looking at option 3. But that's my personal thoughts.
You might get a labor benefit, but you'd be paying escalation, so you probably a wash. Dave?
Thanks, Jill. You mentioned that between option 1 and option 2, if we went with option 1, then Board of Finance would have an chance to go to option 2. I'm find option 2 attractive because of the fact that we're keeping details out of the public eye. So I just don't know if we want to defer that choice to Board of Finance or if we should actually make that decision here. So I don't know if you could expand a little bit on your comment before.
Meaning that our request for the option 1, the reason is the time frame that we're looking to work in the summer. If the Board of Finance chooses to only award the appropriation to be alongside the rest of the budget and becomes active July 1st, then it just pushes back our time frame. But I don't think it has a true financial difference, in my opinion.
A public disclosure difference?
So not necessarily. So if it's option 1, I'm assuming that the Board of Selectmen would want to discuss it in executive session and then the Board of Finance as well. If you do option 2, there would be no description in the budget book. It would just say school security infrastructure initiatives. And then again, if they had questions, we'd have to go in executive session.
And so back to option 1, what would the description be in the budget book in option 2?
Neither would be.
It wouldn't be in either. Okay, thanks for clarification.
Katie?
Rich, there's not an additional cost for a second shift labor?
So we haven't experienced it. So when we did the last school security initiative, we did that all after hours and we did not have an additional cost.
Greg?
I just wanted to clarify what John was alluding to, just in terms of, is there a component of this that may not be able to get through either way? Is that what you're saying from a timing perspective, such that option 3, is that why you're suggesting option 3 is
me?
viable?
Yeah.
I mean, the timing of HHR and the installation of the enhancement is going to be what, a couple of years?
2025.
2025. So, I was thinking about doing it all in 1 year versus staggering. That was the point that I was trying to make. And do you gain efficiencies? And it's probably a while.
The point is, like, it may not get done till then anyway, so you're not,
If we do option
Some
1,
of
it
the
could-
okay.
The schools are on different timeframes.
Yeah.
Dave?
Just to follow up, thank you for the additional details, Rich. So I would be supportive of option 1, as you mentioned, Jill, giving me additional information.
I agree with Dave.
I agree with option 1.
We have to actually vote because we have not requested an appropriation yet. Do you have an opinion yet?
Option
3.
Okay.
1.
One, music, Julie?
Is this our votes?
I'm just,
I kind of lean 3 for the reasons John was saying, but I'm if not 3, I would be okay with option 1, I guess. That's where I'm.
you're 3 as well. Okay, well, I think what we can do to properly represent how the board feels is we'll put a motion on for the appropriation. You can amend it. It takes a second. We vote on the amendment and then we keep moving. And then that way the discussion is publicly recorded.
Wait a minute, the amendment's going to fail based on the sense of the meeting. So why don't you just go with option?
Okay,
It's easier for me. I appreciate it.
all right, easier for you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Looking out for Sarah. of
Thanks so
course.
much.
okay. I'm going to add a little language here, though. We have a motion to approve the special appropriation request for fiscal year 25 school security expenditures in the amount of $1,074,000. Robin moves, Sarah seconds. All those in favor? That is Nelson, Parent, McCammon, Maroney, Loveland, Brown, Best. All those opposed. That is Grambling, Sini. Whom are we missing?
That's it.
That's it. Okay.
You.
She
I
voted for.
Thank you. Okay, that passes. So it'll go next to the Board of Selectmen and then the Board of Finance. Board of Selectmen meets on the 8th of April. Actually, we'll take it in the opposite order because we'll be at Board of Finance on the 2nd, Board of Selectmen on the 8th, but it won't get approved at the Board of Finance until the 9th. If you can follow that. Okay. All right. Further discussion and thank you all. Further discussion and possible action on proposed revisions to board policies, 9110, role of the board and members, 9140, conflict of interest, 9170, removal of board officer, 9180, conduct of board members, 9210, officers, 9220, official duties chairperson, 9230, official duties vice chairperson, 9260, committees, and 9270, consultants of the board. March.
So the only change was revision to policy 9210, where we changed the voting procedures for the officers in response to feedback for the board. So it's a nomination and a vote on each one of the officer positions. And then if the board wishes to make a change to the duties of the chairperson, we were able to confirm with the town that the town treasurer's reports that we submit, these are for expenditures that have already been made, don't need to be signed. So if we wanted to eliminate that from the secretary job description and from the chairperson, we could do that. And Rich could just submit them unsigned. Great.
I think we should take out meaningless work.
Correct.
Okay, any questions? Okay, one note is that committees all need to have a record maintained by the chairperson, which includes the names of committee members in attendance and a listing of the topics discussed. So it's very similar to our meeting minutes. We were asking Cass to help us put that together, fairly simple, maybe with Sarah, and get that out to the committee chair people. It'll just be a template that just needs to be filled out every time the committee runs.
And who do we give it to?
Yeah, or what are we doing
Cass.
with that?
Then it goes to
Just
just
to keep it? Yeah.
Can we have Sarah sign them? Because she needs stuff to sign.
Then it goes to Cass and it will get posted online.
Perfect.
Okay. Surprise, Kath. Okay. All right, with that, no questions? Get my thing back. All right, I gotta make it up. We have a motion to approve proposed revisions to board policies 9110, role of the board and members, 9140, conflict of interest, 9170, removal of a board officer, 9180, conduct of board members, 9210, officers, 9220, official duties chairperson, 9230, official duties vice chairperson, 9260, committees, and 9270, consultants of the board. Julie moves, Dennis seconds, all those in favor? Okay, that is Best, Lublin, Maroney, Sini, Grambling, McCammon, Parent, Nelson, opposed, Brown. Motion passes. Personnel report, March.
The 2 bus drivers who resigned and the 2 we hired. That's all we have.
Say again, sorry. Oh, all right, public comment. Thank you.
If anybody would like to participate in public comment, please come to the podium. If anybody online would like to participate, please indicate by raising your hand. We have no raised hands at this time.
We have a motion to adjourn. That is John, followed by Julie. All those in favor? That's unanimous.